Hey, it's JC. Welcome to Urban Knife Guy, where we explore the urban lifestyle and jungle survival. Today we're going to have a look at two Tops knife, the Fieldcraft Brothers of Bushcraft B.O.B knife and the Tops Brakimo. And I'll do a head-to-head and I'll tell you which I think is better for bushcraft, especially for me in the jungle. First, if you watch this channel regularly but have not subscribed, please do so to help the channel out. And if you'd like to support the channel even more, do check out my shop links in the pinned comment or description below. You can really help the channel out by buying something through those links. Thanks a lot. Tops Knives is a well-known brand from the US. They make great knives, many different designs, and they make both kind of tactical knives as well as jungle outdoor survival knives. And they do a really good job with the heat treat, especially for the 1095 steel. I've got two knives here which are generally considered the most popular bushcraft knives. There is the Fieldcraft Brothers of Bushcraft knife, also known as the B.O.B knife, and the Brakimo. And I've actually been using the Brakimo for almost a year now. I've been really happy with it. This is in 1095 steel, and I decided I wanted to try and upgrade to another steel. So I decided to go with the Fieldcraft knife in 154 cm. So I know this isn't an exact head-to-head because there are different steels, but I already know what the 1095 is, so I wanted to know what 154 cm would be in terms of edge retention and just general usage. But I'll break down my experiences with both knives, and then maybe you can form your opinion which you think might suit you better. Alright, let's get started. And let's start off with the package that you get. This is the B.O.B knife. You get a kydex sheath with a metal clip which can rotate. So you can technically scout carry this if you like. I vertically carry it. And this really was designed for bushcraft, right? Brothers of Bushcraft. Group of people came together to put in all the things that they think were needed in a bushcraft knife. And that's why they do have a ferro rod here. And this is a kydex sheath. And it's got a very good fit. Very secure. There's the knife. Okay, I'll talk about the knife in just a bit. Let's talk about the Brakimo, the sheath here. Again, kydex sheath, same clip, but I would say this sheath is actually better than this sheath in terms of the quality of the kydex, but also the finishing. Just look at the holes here. There are all these grommets. This is just holes drilled in, so it's a bit raw. Now these have screws, but they use this kind of a hex, Allen key type of nut or bolt. And you know, I find this size is an odd size. I have a whole bunch of Allen keys, but none would fit this, so I can't even remove this. It's a very specific size for the Allen key, so not one of those standard sizes. So it's just a small thing, but I feel that the quality of this kydex sheath is better. Alright, so sheaths out of the way, we have the knives, and you can see it. Now, visually, if you look at it, the Brakimo looks larger than the B.O.B, and it is. I mean, the blade is larger. If you were to put them like that, you can see the blade of this is 5.25 inches. I believe this is about 4.5 inches long in terms of the blade. But the handle for the B.O.B is longer. There's also got this pommel which extrudes out from the handle. And in terms of weight, I expected the Brakimo to be heavier, but actually when I first picked up this knife I was surprised how heavy it is. Now, I'm not sure if there's a weight difference between the 1095 and the 154, but just to show you the difference between these two. So in terms of grams, this is about 295, 296. That's about 10.4 ounces. This one here, the Brakimo, slightly lighter, about 280 or so, and that's about 9.9 ounces. So there is actually a significant difference, and you feel it in the hand. Honestly, you feel it in the hand for two reasons. One is of course the absolute weight. The other is also, I think, the balance. I'll show you the balance for this because of the way the handle is, and I think because of this extended pommel here, or the tang, the weight, the balance point, you can see it's really almost 1 inch down into the handle, where the Brakimo is where you expect the center point to be, and that's the balance between where the blade and handle meets, which is good. So I do feel this actually feels lighter and more balanced in hand, and this actually feels a bit heavier. Now, they're definitely both very sturdy and hefty knives, and that's because of the thickness, both 5 millimeters thick. Although I'd say visually this looks thicker, but I believe that's just due to the coating and the color. So the darker color finish here just makes it look a bit thinner, but I have measured them. Now, what is different, even though they're both 5 millimeters thick in terms of the stock, is the thickness behind the blade, and that's behind the edge. And that's really the thickness after the secondary bevel here. And this is about 0.3 millimeters. This is about 0.5, 0.6 millimeters. So it's quite significant. This is much thicker behind the blade, or behind the edge, I'm sorry. And you might be wondering, how important is that? That really determines how slicey the knife gets, how effective it is in cutting through something. It also affects the strength of the blade, whether it will chip if you're putting it through hard use. But ultimately, I think both would work, right? Both, I'm sure, have been tested. Heat treat is good, but it becomes, I guess, how you use it. And I'll share my experience when I went out to the field when I used it. I should also preface this by saying, you know, I've had this for almost a year, so I've been using this a lot, so I'm very used to it. And this is new to me, so I'm still learning how to use it. I'm sure that affects how I feel about the knife. So I compare this to like a musical instrument. Some people can pick up any instrument and they can play it effortlessly. Some people need to get used to the instrument. Same with maybe a racket or a pool cue, right? I play pool, and if I use my cues, I'm definitely more comfortable than using a foreign cue. Same thing for me for knives. Now, you may or may not be the same. You might pick up any knife and it work perfectly in your hands, but for me, I need to get used to the tool before I can use it effectively, especially when it comes to fine tasks, because you really need to know what angle to put it, how much pressure to put in, and those are things that I only get to know after time when I use the knives. But let me know in the comments if you're the same, whether you can pick up any knife and use it, or you really get used to a particular knife. What else should I mention? Of course, the design, as you can see, is different. This has a wider blade. This has no jimping. This has quite aggressive jimping. In fact, some people have mentioned it's too aggressive. I do find it quite aggressive, because if you really press it down, you are going to feel it, and you might even get blisters. And the other is the shape of the handle. This is thinner but longer. This is shorter but I would say wider, and they're both roughly about the same thickness. So I have small to medium hands, and to me this Brakimo fits perfectly. I get a confident grip. It feels good in my hand. For the B.O.B, I find the handle a bit big. You can see it. If I choke up especially, I come all the way over here, and there's all the space. But if you've got large hands, then I'm sure you would actually enjoy this real estate. The other main difference, of course, is this doesn't have exposed tang or the extended pommel. This has it, and this has also that notch which is meant for a fire steel. So you can't really strike edge for both these knives on the spine because of the finish and coating, but you can strike right here. That easily catches a spark for both, and very well. And I really see no need for this. It's quite difficult to use it, or a bit awkward as well, but again, it could be just something, you know, you have to get used to. So that's kind of just the overview of the knives. Aesthetically, I think both knives look good, but I prefer the Brakimo personally. So let's do an edge retention test first. Now, I expect the 154cm to outperform this greatly. It should, right? But I just want to know by how much, even though it's a non-scientific test. And I'll bring both knives out to the jungle, and I'm going to try to do some tasks. And then I'll share with you my thoughts after this on both these knives, and which I think is better for bushcraft in the jungle. So let's do the edge retention test first. We're at my workshop desk, and we're going to do a very simple edge retention test. I've got 10mm jute rope here. I'm going to do 20 cuts on the rope, and then I would do a paper cut test, and we'll just see how it goes as we cycle through 20 cuts. And I have touched up the blades, stropped them so they're all equally as slicey, or as much as I can get them. And let's see how this unscientific edge retention test goes, and I'll start off with the Brakimo. We're back in the studio, the knives have been cleaned, and here are my thoughts after the edge retention test and testing the knives out in the jungle. Now, I would say that I'm surprised and conflicted. Well, let's talk about the good and the bad. So in terms of ergonomics and just the feel in the hand, I do feel that the Brakimo is actually better than the B.O.B. And I think there's several reasons for that. It is the handle. I do prefer the handle. I prefer the balance. I also prefer the weight and the shape of the blade. And I think, again, that's got to do with the balance. Now, when it came to edge retention, I would say that this performed just so badly, I'm almost embarrassed, because I couldn't even get through 35 cuts of the rope, and then it couldn't even really cut the rope well, and I could not cut paper after. Whereas for the B.O.B, I could easily cut through from the beginning, and it made it all the way through 40 cuts, and I still could cut paper after that. Now, I couldn't slice through like butter, but it still could cut with very little catching. So in terms of edge retention, this 154 cm definitely beats this, but I was just surprised at the edge retention. Wasn't as good as I thought, and I've done the previous test before and it didn't seem to be that bad unless I didn't sharpen and strop it well enough. But you know, in the initial paper cuts, it was good. So maybe it could cut paper well, but the working edge wasn't that good. In any case, definitely 1095 doesn't hold its edge, even with this good Tops heat treat. But I should mention that this is really talking about jute rope, which is very fibrous, and then paper. When it comes to wood, I still don't think there will be an issue if you're doing woodcraft for bushcraft or outdoors. It will still cut, it will still bite, it will still chop, and all the things that you need. So we're really nitpicking in terms of the edge retention. But no doubt, this 154 cm is superior. And even though this has a thickness behind the edge, it somehow cut the jute rope easier. But when I was out in the field and I was doing feather sticking, finer work, this actually didn't do as good a job as the Brakimo. This really did fine work much better. So I'm not sure if it's the thickness behind the edge or just simply because I'm much more used to the Brakimo. I know the angle and the weight much better. I know how much pressure to put, and I need more time with the Tops. So I will reserve my judgment, but at least in this initial testing, I felt the finer work was harder. And also when I was choking up to do the fine work, this point at the heel of the blade is a bit sharp, and so it was uncomfortable. And the jimping over here is, you know, I think a bit sharper than it needs to be. So I would say, again, a point against that in terms of the overall ergos and handling. The Tops Brakimo definitely beat out the B.O.B in that case. That's what I think, at least again in my hands, which are small to medium. In terms of battening and harder chopping, both performed, I think, just as well. Maybe the Brakimo marginally better, again due to the weight distribution, but really close. These can really take a beating, and I think they are both tough. So what are my final thoughts? Well, if Tops were to make the Brakimo with 154 cm or a better steel, I think this would be hands down a winner in my opinion. In the meantime, I think I definitely like the steel better. And what I'm going to do some modifications to this Tops Fieldcraft knife first. I think I'm going to get rid of this excess pommel over here. I think that will help with the weight distribution. I'm definitely going to round this point over here and make the jimping less aggressive. And then I'm going to bring it out and test it for a while and see if I find that it actually works and feels just as well as the Brakimo. And if it does, then definitely this will be the winner because of the steel. Well, one last point of comparison, which I think it's very important for these two knives, is the price. So assuming this Fieldcraft B.O.B was $10.95 steel, that'll be about US $175. The Brakimo with $10.95 is slightly more expensive at $185 US. And I can see that a lot of people might think that for $10.95 steel, that price is very high to pay. And I agree if you just look at the steel, but if you look at the overall design, the fit and finish, the quality of the heat treat, and you get a good tool, then I think maybe that price is maybe not worth it, but at least I think it's somewhat justified even if you don't feel that full value. But what is the price that you can put on a dependable good tool? So that's another discussion. But if you talk about the Fieldcraft in 154 cm as this is, that's US $230. So that's quite a lot more expensive than the 1095. So overall, I think Tops knives are pretty expensive. Some people consider them overpriced. I personally think they are not cheap. They are on the expensive side, but I do recognize that they are good designs, they have good fit and finish, they're well made, and they are tested as well. So I do give credence to that, and I do accept a brand tax for good brands. So I'm personally okay with that. But that's something to consider if you're thinking about buying the 1095 version. I think I would go with the Brakimo. But if you want a better steel, then you would have to go with then this 154 cm, because there's no other choice with the Brakimo. But as I said, I'm going to do modifications for this knife, bring it out to the field, and we'll see what happens in a few months. Well, let me know your thoughts in the comments below if you have these two knives, which you think is better, and what steel you have on your Fieldcraft knife. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you like the content in general, please subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. Thanks for watching. Talk to you soon.